Yeah, let us kick things off. So, hello everyone. My name is Rob. I'm the director of events and marketing at Power to Fly, and we're here to discuss talent and fraud in 2026 challenges and solutions. So, real quick, just flashing this code of conduct on the screen. It's a big wall of legalese, but basically it says, don't be a jerk. So, if you have any questions, just shoot me a DM there. Love if you are comfortable to turn your camera on if you're having your breakfast or lunch wherever you're joining us from the world. No problem whatsoever. And we are recording this conversation. Some of you might be watching the recording right now or watching us on YouTube. So hello there, YouTube. If you are joining us live, though, we will be sending this recording out in a few days. So no need to take notes. That should be arriving right in your inbox. And we do want to hear from you. So if you have any questions for Kati, please add those to the chat. We will try to get through as many as possible, as well as the questions you pre-submitted. Also, if you have comments or anything like that, happy to hear from you. If you are a member of SHRM, I'm sharing the SHRM code on the screen right now. You can also take a screenshot of that if you need that for later. I'll try to add it to the chat in just a moment as well. If you're not a member of SHRM, ignore this. And just to tell you a bit about Power to Fly, we help organizations attract top talent and retain engaged employees with solutions that simplify recruitment, enhance employee satisfaction, and drive long-term business success. We've got about 200 million plus professionals in our network across the globe, and we are a 100% woman-led company backed by Morgan Stanley. Now, I'd love to introduce you to today's featured speaker, Katy Peichert, who is the CEO.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, Katy. She's the CEO at CatGBT. Love that name. And also an EMEA and LATAM talent partner at Front. She has 15 plus years of extensive talent and tech and leadership experience. Previously, she was leading global people and talent at Brighter and The Workshop and acted as a senior recruiting partner for technology and music tech companies. And we were just speaking before we went live about all the amazing places that she lives, but she actually speaks 7 human languages and has studied in Poland, France, Portugal, Brazil, Germany, and she is currently based in Spain. So, Kati, we are so grateful that you are sharing your wisdom with us today.
Thank you for the invite and welcome, everyone. Yes, sometimes I ask myself, 15 years after starting my career in recruitment, I believe no one is born a recruiter. I kind of fell into it and I love it, especially that every day is different and it presents different challenges. Almost every day you open up your inbox, anytime you connect to speak with a candidate, but trust me, 5 years ago, I wouldn't say that connecting to an interview, you would be worrying it might not be a human that you're talking to.
Yes, well, let's get into that because the statistics are pretty striking. 48% of candidates admit to using some unauthorized AI tool during interviews. And obviously, we can get into specifics of what those kind of tools could be. So, from your experience, is this being driven by candidate desperation? We know it's really tough out there. Is this kind of a breakdown in trust? Is this something else entirely? Where is this coming from? And maybe you can tell us also what are some examples of this kind of unauthorized AI tools that folks are using?
Of course, I think there is truth to a little bit of everything. So, if you look at the job market, we've been through a real roller coaster. Again, if you look at the 5 year mark, maybe pandemic, post-pandemic, boom, then freeze, then Gen AI revolution, again, freeze. Again, this year seems to be like a very volatile, but in some places, very hot market for different roles that we were used to. Now, the candidates are trying to do their best, and companies are trying to also get ahead of the competition in the usage and assessment of the candidates' um, skills. So, from my perspective, yes, it might be, just optimization. I wouldn't say desperation, because if you are now open to work and actively seeking, you want to optimize for the types of roles that you are interested in. You want to spend the minimum amount of time on tasks that can be automated. So that's actually a really good use of AI, just making sure that you get as many applications out there and prioritize the roles that fit your profile the best. And then, you no longer spend hours creating a CV, although I would recommend always critically reviewing CVs before sending them over and not just batch automated send to all of the roles available. So yeah, one is like optimizing the time for administrative tasks. And secondly, I would say is a way also of showcasing the usage of a new technology. Look back, like many years ago, we would use different ways of applying. Do you remember still printing CVs and
Hmm.
bringing to the offices? And everything got through the ATS, and perhaps we're about to see a completely different way of interviewing. Now,
Yeah.
unauthorized usage. I would draw a clear line here between exactly like candidate productivity, examples of using AI or any frameworks that make you more productive and better at your work, versus cheating. I would draw a really clear line that not all usage of the tools is cheating. Something is enhancing, and cheating is a completely different way that, for instance, you're impersonating someone or you're adapting your experience you don't have to gain or like go ahead of other applicants through the application process. And that is something that should be verified probably at the start, during, and at the end of the process.
Mhm.
So, yeah, maybe I'll pause here
Yeah.
because there is like so much to cover. I don't want to
Y-
just
Yeah, no, I've heard, there's
monologue.
so many I think you make a great point that there's the enhancement element, and in fact, LinkedIn and a lot of other platforms are actually have AI integrated for you to have that enhancement and that time saving. And then that's okay. Obviously, again, as you said, keeping the human touch on it, making sure that it's accurate. But then there's the kind of cheating aspect of using AI. And in my experience, speaking with other talent leaders like yourself, there's different ways that it's happening. One way is obviously on the technical end. People are using it to,
Mhm.
with in coding challenges when they shouldn't. And others, it's more even in the interview stage, not kind of prepping beforehand, which I think is perfectly fine. But some people are actually using it live in the interview to kind of answer things there. Have you like heard of either of kind of those examples, and where
Sure.
else can people kind of draw the line between, AI as a productivity tool versus like when it's stepping into this misrepresentation?
Yeah, I've seen and I've heard and I've got feedback also from technical teams on the usage. I think what talent leaders can do is to look at the process and also be very prescriptive when it comes to instructions and preparation of the candidates and deciding, do we allow the usage of AI, or we ask the candidates to proactively disable it, at least for the parts of the process. I wouldn't like to say, it makes sense to disable it for all parts of the process, because the reality is we use AI, at least I do, I think you all do, on a daily basis, and it's a part of our reality and it's part of our job. And we also don't know where it will take us. So even, from a week before till today, we got different tools related to, design systems. There is updates to different LLMs on a daily basis. And I think there is a bit of this FOMO to keep up with AI. In some people, especially in technical or leadership roles, feel the pressure as well to demonstrate their AI capability, because many companies just to name Zapier, Sierra, they are proactively asking for AI fluency tests during the process. So we couldn't be prescriptive that, yeah, in this part, we would like to see how do you use AI tools versus where you really want to test how are the non-AI enabled capabilities of the candidate. So I can give you an example. In some of the product engineering or software engineering roles, engineering leaders or colleagues want to see like how the candidate is writing code, how is analyzing it critically themselves versus using AI. So in that case, we ask not to use AI, and if we detect that there is, a certain like latency problem, we don't see like a critical thinking from a candidate, we we put it like as a detriment to the interview. But if we actually want a candidate to use AI for the ideation or for the research, we also prescriptively ask them to do that and illustrate also their thinking process.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, there is so much of it. So I've just recently read also that Sierra AI offers this AI native type of interview that we can actually apply AI knowledge to verify the AI fluency by actually asking a candidate on the spot to solve their industry relevant problem using AI agents, AI apps. And I think that's also a way to go. And that would be like a very positive usage of AI towards assessing the productivity. However, cheating and unauthorized use would be obviously, again, lying about the experience or filling the gaps of the experience of the candidates by just, yeah, using those
Mhm.
plugins or using AI technology to reply instead of thinking and drawing from the real experience. How to like I've been thinking about that before this call, and one of the human ideas that I have is to bring different people and kind of cross interview on different skills by different angles. So maybe product interviewers would have questions about the experience, then engineering, depending like how you create the panel, but making sure that the rubric is not something that can be prepared
Yeah.
and that can be also asked from different angles and improvised. So while we want to stay away from the bias and we want to be prescriptive and we want to assess the candidate, let's not make it kind of foolproof, you know?
Yeah. Well, and I think even going back to old-fashioned biases, like we always recommended Power to Fly to interview with multiple people for the sake of inclusion and sake of overcoming some of those other biases, because that way you're getting a diverse group of voices. But I think one thing that you said, which is I think so key, which is the responsibility of the employer, which is to state very clearly at the start of both the interview and really pre-interview, this is what we're expecting. This is when you can use AI. We don't want you to use AI. Like making that very clear. That way, there's really no confusion on the candidate's part there. So I think we're
Yeah.
maybe because this is all so new, we're not quite seeing that stated at the top of a lot of these processes, but it really needs to be.
Of course, and just to add that, if you want to design for the usage of AI, let's also make sure that we test for candidates' responsibility of using AI. So, for instance, if you build an app, you create code, you deal with data, you make sure that you understand how AI infrastructure, how security, how compliance
Mhm.
works. Um, yeah, there's so much to it. I know
Yeah.
we're at the time, but like I'm also happy just that to follow up on the conversation offline.
Oh,
Uh,
that's great. Yeah,
yeah.
and how much would you say is this fraud problem? Is this a symptom of a broken hiring process as a whole? are we inadvertently creating these conditions that incentivize candidates? Because we hear all the time from job seekers, I can't get past the ATS. I need to do something that there. And at the same time, kind of on the talent side, and I'm sure you've experienced this yourself, like people are saying, like, you know, I have 100 I have 100 applications for, or I have 1,000 applications for a role. I used to get a
Yeah,
hundred
more like
for. I'm
that.
using AI to kind of sort through that. People are falling in the gap. Then the talent is unhappy. Are some of these uses of AI this fraud? Is this a symptom coming out of all this?
Yeah, I think not necessarily broken hiring process, although we've seen that hiring process was full of biases and imperfect for many years. I think it's a great opportunity to rethink many steps and how we assess candidates. But at the same time, it's simply that right now we have a very powerful tool that enhances our skills. And can enhance us, for the productivity, but also for cheating. So that's
Mhm.
the line that I draw from the very beginning. And I think the companies are also not so prescriptive when it comes to how do they work with AI. I think it's very early days still to assess like where do we want to see the usage of AI, how do we want to measure critical thinking, but the early projections are that we should be assessing the candidate's ability to think on their own feet, make sure like how to use these tools to the best um, to the best of the company and their role. So, in other words, I think it's a symptom of a great revolution, and yeah, just stating the obvious. Um, Now we have an opportunity to rethink these processes not only by creating you know different approach to assessment. And to your point about unconscious bias or bias at all, I actually use different LLMs to point out, based also on, my interview questions at a large data scale, to tell me, Katy, where can you actually have biases? And that's very powerful. So, like all the big data analysis, it helps me being a better recruiter and help assess and use better questions. So, again, AI for ideation and checking, like keeping you on the track is really, really good tool. And what you mentioned about like the big amount of applications, so thousands, etc. Of course, most of the ATS offer that tool, but I would again mention without the proper training of the AI models within those tools, I would recommend that the recruiters still stay very critical to it. For
Hmm.
instance, coming back to the software engineering branch where it's my major point of recruitment. You will find people who are maybe not so present on LinkedIn. They would rather be in other places, and some of the AI tools in ATS would actually punish you for not being active and say, well, there is like little online visibility of that person, so that the model tells you perhaps this is an AI application. Whereas now it's just a person who apparently wasn't too open, wasn't too public. So yeah, here's like another question, like how private can we stay these days when
Hmm.
actually some of the AI models are punishing us for, having very limited information to verify us.
Yeah, I think that's even
Yeah.
kind of, speaks to what Tatiana was saying in the chat there. Recruiters or employers request so much in hiring processes nowadays that candidates feel they need to be extremely great CVs and documents. And I've heard that, from people say, you should be posting on LinkedIn like once a day or once a week, but it's like that's a lot for some people. They don't have the time to do that or don't have the inclination. But to your point, people are looking at that, and that's also kind of going over whether people are accurate. So yeah, it's a lot. And Shakira is saying in the chat also, are we supposed to go into every interview assuming the candidate is cheating with AI? I feel like it would be so focused on making sure they aren't cheating that I'm missing the actual content. I think that's a great point, Shakira. Anything to actually, Kati, on that point,
Yeah.
like it's hard
No,
to,
like
yeah, it's hard. We want to be listening to the person. We don't want to the whole time going like, are they doing what they're not something they're not supposed to?
so to be honest, again, the use of AI by recruiters. I'm using some of the, qualified note takers, so the ones that the candidates can opt out, and there is, data security compliant with GDPR and such. But those note takers, as a part of the process, again, help me to stay focused,
Hmm.
help me to cover the notes that, for the past 13 years would be taking notes myself, but I really stay tuned and I listen to the candidate. Whereas then afterwards, I can analyze, the behavior, the tone, the questions that they ask, the answers, and compare it also with the data that I have. So I feel like these days I am much more focused. And again, I'm not going into the interview thinking, oh, I need to be like really, really focused if that's cheating or not. And to be honest, that also comes with a little bit of a human experience. So whenever you feel like something is off, um, test it.
Yeah,
Test it
yeah, and
with
I
data. And like what we say about the gut feeling, don't assume that this is the truth that is happening, but ask yourself, like, was it, that the candidate had very unnatural delayed replies? And then,
Mhm.
sometimes we are talking to neurodivergent people as well,
Yeah, that's
different
true.
cultures. So
Yeah.
before assuming any of these, check for any other components.
Well, I think
And
that's a great point that you made there too, is using those AI tools to actually record the session so you can be present and then you can think back afterwards. It was like, oh, there was some red flags there. Let me revisit what I recorded and see, dive in deeper, but being in the moment that you are in it. And in fact, you probably wouldn't even recognize those red flags if you weren't in the moment.
exactly. And these tools, you can also ask, I don't know, your supervisor, your colleagues for a second
Sure.
opinion. You can store it for HR, for compliance. Like if fraud has happened, you have more kind of proof, like how did you assess the interview process, etc. So yeah, one idea is also, so again, like document verification early on. That is pretty sensitive and well, before maybe coming back to only on-site interviews, in-person interviews, I would say, okay, maybe we integrate document and ID verification uh, early in the process, obviously with compliant tools and such, and yeah, forget about it.
Yeah, I think that speaks to a bit of Tatiana's question also in the chat. What do you think about getting the candidates having tech skills before the screening to be sure of the skills before getting into a time-consuming interview? So are your thoughts at all, like getting that verified? I think we're hearing more and more of this. It's like people want everything verified before we're getting into these, yeah,
Yeah,
interview process.
it's I think it's a balance because again, if we're talking about roles that are currently very present in the market, very hot in the market, you also have to make the hiring process not as time consuming to compete with other companies and that your brand, stays welcoming, inclusive. And actually, I am not a big advocate to say, well, live coding versus take-home challenges. We can adopt these according to candidates' preferences, but again, have very good rubric for assessing these. I would still say like having a conversation with a human at the start of the process, and that is what many candidates tell me. It's still very much appreciated. So I know that there are companies, and I think Rob, we were chatting before that, yeah, you can apply video interviews or like AI-driven video interviews early on in the process. Now ask yourself as a human, would you like this to happen? Maybe for certain roles that is high volume, it makes
Hmm.
sense. But to your personal brand, to your company brand, I do believe in the race of the AI that human contact, that human kind of companion through the process is highly valuable.
Yeah, we've talked to a few other folks before because I think this definitely it does come down to keeping your brand, and you don't want people then to go on Glassdoor and other places and say such and such. It's one thing to use AI to send out an automated rejection letter after someone's not even interviewed, right?
Mhm.
But if they've interviewed like three times, it should be a personal handwritten, not handwritten, but personal letter that you're writing. Like you shouldn't be using AI to like generate something there. Because if someone realizes that, it's like, wait, I've been in three interviews. Like they're gonna make it known on LinkedIn there. And I love what you're saying too, Shakira, in the chat. Gut feelings could be a fancy way to dress up biases. I think that's why it's so important to get multiple viewpoints in. Get someone who's a different identity than you, a different skill set than you, to also view that as well. And we're almost out of time, Kati, but I do want to ask one question that I had on my mind is if fraud, if it's, what do you suggest to HR leaders, to leaders in general, if they discover kind of after the person's been hired, oh, they
Oof.
don't have all the skills that like they said they did then, and like something happened at some point. They've gotten all the way through to the hire process, and now, what do I do with this person then? What do you say in that difficult situation?
To be fair, it never happened to me. I've heard stories, and I'm pretty sure, at the scale that we're talking today, it is completely feasible. Well, thankfully, we have employment laws. Usually, when you start at a company, you have a notice period, you have trial period. I think
Hmm.
it's an easy way to go out, but the damage is made. So you made a hire, you hired a wrong person. You have to learn from the verification, and actually, I would argue it's a legal topic that is, using your skills unlawfully. Um, Before that, I mean, I think it's a part of most of the compliance processes. So the companies tend to do background checks, at least, on the employment, ID, work permit, verification, often criminal records, depending, on the gravitas of the role. So I would recommend keeping them, even maybe putting it through a bit earlier in the process. And again, to the balance of make your process inclusive, sensitive, and data compliant, but it is a reply to the reality we're in. And the one thing we haven't touched, and I know we are 2 minutes to the time, but I think another cheating scenario was when we were talking about multiple employment. So
Hmm.
folks interviewing for a full-time position, then accepting another one and working three roles at a time. So that's another kind of cheating scenario, not necessarily related to AI, but I think
No,
AI.
I haven't even heard of that one, but yeah, I mean, it's like, but
Yeah, there were
yeah.
there were some famous cases of someone who had, I don't know, seven jobs at a time.
Oh my gosh.
So yeah, that's another challenge for
But
HR.
again, I think so much of that can come down to like doing your due diligence beforehand, doing
Of
those
course.
background checks. And I
Yeah.
think as you just said, like if you don't have this 30-day, 60-day trial period like in effect, although I know a lot of organizations do, like perhaps consider having that there as that kind of safeguard while you're making sure, okay, does this person have this one job? Is this person know the skills for this job? So this is also great advice. Obviously, this is also a topic that is changing all the time. We're didn't even get into some people using cameras in their interviews and all these other things. So um, as you mentioned, Kati, people can reach out to you if they want to talk to you
Absolutely.
more about this. What's the best way to do that?
Absolutely. So find me on LinkedIn. I'm verified. I'm a real person.
You
And,
saw it here first. Yeah, exactly.
yeah, connect with me on LinkedIn. My company, CatGPT, that's also replying to the times we're in.
Yes.
ChatGPT helps hiring, obviously, in the times of now, especially for growing companies with the usage of AI and beyond. So you can find me also on LinkedIn or chatgpt.io. Connect with me. I'm open to chat with both career seekers, partner with HR professionals, or help the companies.
Wonderful. Well, Kathy Peichert, thank you so much for your time today, and thank you everyone for spending this 30 minutes with us. I know there's a lot of ways you can spend your 30 minutes, so I want you all to treat yourselves for bettering your own careers and your own knowledge. So thank you so much. We will be back soon with more amazing events like this. So thanks everyone, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you for having me. Lovely to meet you. Have a great day.